What has she done to question my loyalty to this country? I served in the United States Marine Corps. I went to Iraq for this country, and my running mate took a bullet for this country. So my question to Kamala Harris is, what the hell have you done to question our loyalty to the United States of America? When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him. I think it's shameful. And look, Caitlin, I know you're worried, and I think justifiably so, about
this isn't about me, Senator. I'm asking questions about you and how you would feel about this.
I'm trying to answer the question. I appreciate if you let me. Well, we asked you to negotiate for border security, not crappy border security that has nothing to do with securing the American southern border. That's a problem.
Well, Senator, that happens all the time. People are appointed from Washington, but the DOJ told Congress, testified this week
Kristen,
that it reviewed
it happens.
Hold on, Senator,
Are you really saying, Kristen?
Senator, let me finish my sentence, then I'll let you finish.
The entire argument in this case is that Donald Trump should go to prison because an employee of his filled out paperwork the wrong way. Well, this is disgraceful. If there's a pilot who is offended by the word wife or the word cockpit, maybe that person shouldn't be a pilot. The idea that we committed to supporting whatever came out of this negotiation is pure, unadulterated bull.
Welcome to JD Vance Destroying Liberals. It's SeanDaniel here, and in this video we're going to see JD Vance go after everybody, really, from Kamala Harris to the VP pick Tim Walz, to Joe Biden, and even to some media reporters and media outlets. And if you like this video, you can obviously like the video or subscribe if you want to see more. And when you're watching, if there's a favorite clip or quote that you have, you can put it in the comments down below. I will interact with you guys down there. And it's good feedback for me to see what you do like in the video. And if you enjoy my content, like maybe the 1 hour montages that I put out, and you want to support me in making these videos, you can hit that super thanks button down below and donate even just a few dollars. And to those of you guys that did do this from my last video, I had a good number of you do that. Thank you so much. It means a lot that anyone would just give freely of some of their money, even a few dollars, in support of a video I made. So thank you so much if you do that. Now let's get started with JD Vance destroying Kamala Harris.
I saw the other day Kamala Harris question my loyalty to this country. That's the word she used, loyalty. And it's an interesting word, simplify, loyalty, because there is no greater sign of disloyalty to this country than what Kamala Harris has done at our southern border. And I'd like to ask the Vice President, what has she done to question my loyalty to this country? I served in the United States Marine Corps. I went to Iraq for this country. I built a business for this country. And my running mate took a bullet for this country. So my question to Kamala Harris is, what the hell have you done to question our loyalty to the United States of America? I grew up in a poor family. The fact that Tim Walz wants to turn it into a bad thing, that I actually worked myself through college, through law school, and made something myself, to me, that's the American dream. And if Tim Walz wants to insult it, I think that's frankly pretty bizarre. Now, look, what really bothers me about Tim Walz, it's not even the positions that he's taken, though certainly he has been a far left radical. You know what really bothers me about Tim Walz as a Marine who served his country in uniform? When the United States Marine Corps, when the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did it. I did what they asked me to do it, and I did it honorably, and I'm very proud of that service. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him, a fact that he's been criticized for aggressively by a lot of the people that he served with. I think it's shameful to prepare your unit to go to Iraq, to make a promise that you're going to follow through, and then to drop out right before you actually have to go.
This is the first president or former president in American history to be convicted of felonies.
So let's talk about precedents. He's convicted of a literal paperwork violation.
He's convicted
that is the predicate.
34 felonies.
That is all of them paperwork violations. Rule a single paperwork violation violation, and they drew 34 felonies out of it. That should really bother you, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. Now let's talk about precedents. 6 years ago, Hillary Clinton paid $113,000 that was misclassified as a legal expense. That's the exact same thing that Donald Trump is accused of. Hillary Clinton got a slap on the wrist and a fine from the FEC. Donald Trump has had 34 felony indictments. It's so obvious that this is about politics, Wolf. So I'm asking unanimous consent, first of all, to enter this into the record, but it explains that wife, the word wife, is an example of the type of language that we need to eliminate. And I'm just asking if that's something you think is necessary or something you support.
I'd have to give that one some more thought.
Well, I would hope that the word wife is not something that or is something that we can all agree is a reasonable vocabulary word that most Americans use in their daily life. It's not something that we need to eliminate.
Does it give you any pause to be his vice president, given how he has treated Mike Pence?
Caitlin, I'm extremely skeptical that Mike Pence's life was ever in danger. I think politics people like to really exaggerate things from time to time.
I know a lot of folks in the Democratic Party, Senator.
A lot of folks in the Democratic Party, Caitlin, act as if January the 6th was the scariest moment of their lives. I think, look, January 6th was a bad day. It was a riot. But the idea that Donald Trump endangered anyone's lives when he told them to protest peacefully, it's just absurd. And the entire legal basis of this prosecution of Donald Trump from Jack Smith.
But they were chanting that they wanted to hang him.
Look, Caitlin, did a few people say some bad things? Sure, but do we blame Donald Trump for every bad thing that's ever been said by a participant in American democracy? I think that's an absurd standard. And look, Caitlin, I know you're worried, and I think justifiably so, about
this isn't about me, Senator.
I'm
asking questions about you and how you would feel about this.
I'm trying to answer the question. I appreciate if you let me. We know that there are threats to American democracy. I think the biggest threat to American democracy, Caitlin, is that the Biden administration is trying to prevent Donald Trump from campaigning and taking his case to the American people, even as they hide their own candidate.
That's presiding over that case. The Biden administration is not preventing Donald Trump from campaigning. He just did two campaign events tonight.
This is a really important point, Caitlin. Who is the number 3 person from the Biden Department of Justice who went to work for the New York prosecutor just months before he brought this case against Donald Trump? Because you've heard some folks in our leadership make this argument that what happened here is Republicans as a conference demanded that we use Ukraine as leverage to get border concessions from the Biden administration. They'll say things like, well, you wanted us to negotiate for border security, and now that we have this package, you say that it's not good enough. Well, we asked you to negotiate for border security, not crappy border security that has nothing to do with securing the American southern border. So this idea that we signed a political death compact where we wanted to negotiate for border security, so we're therefore committed to supporting any package that comes out of these negotiations is ridiculous. If you had a bill that said we're going to legalize 12 million illegal aliens, every single Republican, I hope, would vote against it. But we're not committing ourselves to voting for this thing just because we entered the negotiation. And the idea that we are, and you hear this from some of our leadership, and hopefully they will stop, the idea that we committed to supporting whatever came out of this negotiation is pure, unadulterated bullshit. We supported a negotiation to bring common sense border security to this country. We did not agree to a border fig leaf to send another $61 billion to Ukraine. The basic foundational reality that Kamala Harris pretends to be something different depending on which audience she's speaking to. Now, she has been able to hide this a little bit because for the past couple of weeks, she only speaks in front of a teleprompter. She never gives unscripted remarks, and she's hidden from the American media and from the American people. But we know she's a chameleon. We know she's a person who promised to defund the police and now wants to pretend she's a tough prosecutor. She said that she would be our border czar, and yet for 3.5 years, we have an open border. She said that she would bring some common sense and lower inflation to our economic policies, and yet she cast the deciding vote that raised interest rates, raised home prices, and raised food prices. Kamala Harris is a chameleon. She's a fake, and the American people have to look at her record if we actually want to know how she stands on the issues, because her words simply can't be trusted. Obviously, the big news of the day is that Tim Walz has been nominated as the VP, or is now the presumptive nominee, I should say, for Kamala Harris. My view on it is it just highlights how radical Kamala Harris is. This is a person who listened to the Hamas wing of her own party and selecting a nominee. This is a guy who's proposed shipping more manufacturing jobs to China, who wants to make the American people more reliant on garbage energy instead of good American energy, and has proposed defunding the police just as Kamala Harris does. I think it's interesting, actually, they make an interesting tag team because, of course, Tim Walz allowed rioters to burn down Minneapolis in the summer of 2020, and then the few who got caught, Kamala Harris helped bail them out of jail. So one of the main guys was a Department of Justice official in the Biden administration who jumped ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after Donald Trump.
And yet the DOJ
if that
told
doesn't make you question the legitimacy of the prosecution, that's a problem.
Well, Senator, that happens all the time. People are appointed from Washington, but the DOJ told Congress, testified this week
Kristen,
that it reviewed
it happens.
Hold on, Senator.
Are you really
finish.
saying, Kristen?
Senator, let me finish my sentence.
All
then
the
I'll
time
let you finish. Hold on.
The number.
Let me just finish this. The DOJ told Congress this week it reviewed all communications since Biden took office and found no contact between federal prosecutors and those involved with that case in New York. Can you stick to the substance of the question, though? Let me just ask, because I just want to stick with this line of theory that you are laying out, which is you are saying it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department. If it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department, as you say, which there's no evidence of that, why is it okay for Donald Trump to do that?
Well, Kristen, first of all, you said that it happens all the time, that the number 3 person in the Department of Justice jumps ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after the president's political opponent. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of American democracy, and I don't think that we should legitimize it. Now, if Donald Trump's attorney general had his number 2 or his number 3 jump ship to a local prosecutor's office in Ohio or Wisconsin, and that person then went after Donald Trump's political opposition, that's a different conversation.
Senator,
all he's suggesting is that we should investigate credible arguments of wrongdoing. That's all that Donald Trump is saying. That is not a threat to democracy. That's merely reinforcing our system of law and government.
Bottom line, you are okay with Donald Trump appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, which would include Joe Biden. You're just, to button that up, it sounds like you're saying yes.
On November 10th, 2021, the FAA held an inclusive language summit. Are you familiar with this effort?
I am familiar with it.
Okay. During the summit, which had a solicitation published in the Federal Register, Deputy Administrator Mims stated that when we use terms like airmen or unmanned aircraft, sorry, I'm laughing because this has to be a joke, we're sending a message that only men belong in the aerospace community. Do you agree that the feelings of FAA employees about language are this important?
What I agree is that as we seek to attract the next generation of people into aerospace, mostly they won't look like the people sitting in this room. And so it's our ability to say, how do we bring tomorrow into today, into an industry that is evolving right before our eyes? So our ability to find inclusive ways of reaching underrepresented groups is a right path to be on.
I represent the people of Ohio, and I'm very confident that the majority of Ohioans, if there's a pilot who is offended by the word wife or the word cockpit, maybe that person shouldn't be a pilot. So rather than kowtowing to people who are fragile, maybe we should actually say, if you're so worried about the words that we are using, you shouldn't be flying, multi-ton metal engines through the sky. I know most of you, I like all of you as people, or at least I like the ones of you that I know. I think that you guys have got to do a better job at actually forcing Kamala Harris to answer questions. This is a person who's been the presumptive Democrat nominee for 16 days. She hasn't taken a single real question from a reporter. The American people deserve to get to know the people who want to lead them, and I think it's shameful for Kamala Harris, but increasingly for the media, that she's taking a basement strategy of running from reporters instead of getting in front of them, answering tough questions about her record, and letting the American people know who she is. President Trump and I take hostile questions, we take non-hostile questions, we get out there and talk to people because we respect the American people enough to want to persuade them and not to try to run from them. So I think you guys got to do a better job. That's my humble opinion.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
The reason why we have a border crisis, it is by design. Biden is invading the country with people who he knows are going to vote disproportionately for Democrats. And this is an important point. Again, I didn't realize this until a few weeks ago. California has 5 more congressional representatives than it should. Do you know why? They count illegal aliens for purposes of assigning apportionment in Congress. So when these guys flood the country with millions of people who shouldn't be here, they destroy the voting power of citizens in our own republic. This is by design, and this is maybe the last very good chance we have to stop it in 2024.
It is something else.
We know in 2020 that there were massive pieces of evidence that were suppressed by collusion between the national security state in this country and various
You're talking about the Hunter Biden laptop.
The Hunter Biden laptop story.
It was out there.
The reason that it was suppressed on social media
for like a day or two on Twitter.
Jake, millions of Americans, there have been studies on this, didn't see that story, that would have seen it if there hadn't been that collusion between these technology companies and members of the media who had security clearances. These people were using the trust acquired over a lifetime of public service and lying to the American people.
So you agree with Kash Patel?
In order. I agree that we need to look seriously at how there was collusion between members of the press and big technology companies and members of national security state. Jake, that's not journalism. It is not journalism to take your security clearance, lie to the American people, and then persuade the big technology companies to censor anti-Joe Biden stories. That's not journalism. That is cooperation between the government and journalism. It's the opposite. That is what really bothers me.
Whatever happened to the Republican Party being the party of law and order?
We are the party of law and order, but you can't have law and order if you have judges.
This former president has been convicted 34 times
law and order,
violating law.
Law and order is not having a judge who donates to the political opposition to Donald Trump and then tries to throw Donald Trump in jail. That's the opposite of law and order.
$15 donation.
A $15 donation combined with, he said that he wanted to fight Donald Trump. His daughter has made almost $100 million fundraising for Democrats, Wolf. Every single thing about this points to the fact that this was a political sham prosecution. Again, if you guys ever get an opportunity to ask Tim Walz or Kamala Harris some questions, he made this interesting comment that the Kamala Harris campaign put out there, and I bet they're regretting they put it out there now, because he said that and he was making a point about gun control. He said we shouldn't allow weapons that I used in war to be on America's streets. Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone? What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not. And if he wants to criticize me for getting an Ivy League education, I'm proud of the fact that my mamaw supported me, that I was able to make something of myself. I'd be ashamed if I was him and I lied about my military service like he did.
I know you say that you two haven't discussed the vice presidency directly, but you said you'd certainly be open to it if he did offer it to you. Considering that, does it give you any pause whatsoever about taking that job when you see how he treated his last vice president?
Well, Caitlin, first of all, again, I haven't talked to Donald Trump about becoming vice president. I think it's important to support President Trump as Republicans because I think he was a good president. And I think that he made the country more prosperous. And I think he made the world more peaceful. What gives me pause, Caitlin, is another 4 years of Biden's administration where he's opened the borders and where you have effectively a conflict, a major world conflict in nearly every continent in the world.
But my question was not about President Biden. It's about President Trump.
Well, look, it's fundamentally about President Biden because if you're comparing the two records of these presidents and asking, who do I want to be president? It's very clearly that I want Donald Trump to be president. And I understand that there are a lot of things that people like you disagree that he did, but I think fundamentally he was a good president. He accomplished a lot for the country. And the question fundamentally for our country is, do we want 4 more years of Joe Biden or do we want 4 more years of the peace and prosperity of Donald Trump? That to me is an easy question. And what do these boxes represent, I guess? I mean, they're, equality here, they have different sized boxes, and then here there are different boxes here. I'm just curious what this is supposed to mean.
Yeah. Well, that is, opportunity, if you will, opportunity and how you position people that may be less fortunate for the same opportunities that other people might receive.
Okay. I got to say, Mr. Washington, I appreciate the attempt at an explanation there, but I don't fully understand why equality and equity are different. I would assume that equality of opportunity is something that we all believe in and agree with. I don't really care whether the pilot that I have, what their gender is, what their skin color is. I just care about whether they can do the job. And I hope that you're committed to the same exact attitude, because if we don't have safe airline pilots, and if we relax the standards in an effort to get pilots of a certain skin color or a certain gender, it's going to be disastrous, quite literally. Thank you. But what the leaders of Ukraine from Zelensky on down have said, that there was a negotiated peace to be had back in the early days of fighting. You know who prevented it? The Biden administration and Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So I actually think that there was an opportunity for peace. I still think there's an opportunity for peace. You just have to get the wackos and the idiots out of the White House.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And you oppose aid to Ukraine. Explain your position.
So what we're saying to the president and really to the entire world is you need to articulate what the ambition is. What is $61 billion going to accomplish that $100 billion hasn't? We have to remember, Jake, Ukraine is functionally destroyed as a country. The average age of a soldier in the Ukrainian army right now is 43. That's tragic. That's older than me. I'm 39. If this thing goes on a little bit longer, the average age of a Ukrainian soldier is going to be older than you, and then a year later it could be Wolf Blitzer. That is a tragedy. What does it look like?
I don't like this age graph thing.
I'm sorry, Jake.
I'm 54 for those wondering.
We are getting to a place where we are going to be functionally on the hook to pay for Ukrainian pensioners, to rebuild the entire country.
Right.
We need to bring the killing to a stop, and that's what American leadership should be doing, not writing more blank checks to the war.
Where she said this, quote, "He is not a hillbilly if he wrote a huge book." Rich bleep? I mean, I'm a rich bleep, but I'm not running for office pretending that I'm not. JD, you're on Jennifer Lawrence's mind. How do you feel of her calling you a fraud?
Well, look, if we're criticizing each other, Brian, I'd just say that Jennifer Lawrence's performance in Hunger Games 3 was a little one-dimensional, I think. So, look, at the end of the day, she's a Hollywood liberal who's criticizing a Republican Senate candidate. I think her movies are great, don't really care that much about her politics, and don't really care about it beyond that.
Does it give you any pause to be his vice president, given how he has treated Mike Pence?
Caitlin, I'm extremely skeptical that Mike Pence's life was ever in danger. I think politics people like to really exaggerate things from time to time.
I think
know a
Mike
lot of
Pence
folks in
would
the
disagree
Democratic
with
Party.
that, Senator.
A lot of folks in the Democratic Party, Caitlin, act as if January the 6th was the scariest moment of their lives. I think, look, January 6th was a bad day. It was a riot. But the idea that Donald Trump endangered anyone's lives when he told them to protest peacefully, it's just absurd.
I know you're covering the vice president here. I figured I'd come by and one, just give a good look at the plane, because hopefully it's going to be my plane in a few months. But I also thought you guys might get lonely because the vice president doesn't answer questions from reporters and hasn't for 17 days. Have they given you guys an explanation for why she won't take questions from reporters? No? Nobody? Okay, great. Well, I hope that she changes your mind, because it'd be good for the American people, and I think it'd be good for you all if she actually ran a real campaign instead of one from a basement with a teleprompter. So have a good one, guys. See ya.
What would you like to hear from her?
I'd love her to answer some questions. I'd love her to just answer what she wants to do and also explain why every single position she has changed. She pretends to be a prosecutor, yet she pretends to be a tough on crime prosecutor, and yet here she is wanting to defund the police. She's the border czar, yet she's opened up the American southern border. This is a person who has to answer the questions from the media, and it's disgraceful that she runs for you guys. It's also insulting for the American people. But anyway, we're going to go do our event. I appreciate you guys being here. I wish she paid you some more attention. See ya.
Well, that wraps up JD Vance Destroying Liberals. I think it's for about 25 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit that like button down below or subscribe if you want to see more. Or you can support me in donating with that super thanks button if you do want to do that. Now I have some fun facts for you guys about JD Vance that I want to go through. But if you do have a favorite thing that you enjoyed from the video, again, put it down in the comments. I'll respond to you guys. Now, a few fun facts about JD Vance is that he had a bunch of different names throughout his life because his family had different splits and divorces and problems. He really grew up in a terrible area financially of Ohio, pretty poor family. Let's try that again. He was born James Donald Bowman, then he was James David Hamill, and then he took the name of his grandma who raised him, and he became JD Vance. I know he did some of those name changes because he wanted to disassociate from family members that never really had a part in his life at all. Like I said, he grew up in a very troubled childhood in rural Ohio, and because of these issues, he was actually raised by his grandparents due to all the issues and especially the drug addiction that his parents held. I think specifically his mom. And his grandparents, or his grandma, is called Mima or Grandma or something. I had it in there. You guys can figure it out. JD's grandparents who raised him were actually Union Democrats that were huge supporters of FDR, which is kind of weird because obviously he's the Republican vice presidential candidate now, and his grandparents that came in and took care of him when he was in such a tumultuous time in his life, they weren't Republicans. Another one, after graduating high school, Vance entered the Marine Corps, which I'm sure some of you know, and you know from the clips where he's trashing Tim Walz for his record with the military. And when Vance was in the Marine Corps, he served in Iraq as a corporal. Regarding his service, he said this, quote, "I served my country honorably, and I saw when I went to Iraq that I'd been lied to, that the promises of the foreign policy establishment were a complete joke." So maybe he knows a little bit about the military-industrial complex from his firsthand experience in Iraq, which he criticized Tim Walz for being in the military, claiming he went into a battle zone, claiming he got shipped abroad when he actually didn't. Next one. After the Marine Corps, probably with the GI Bill, JD Vance attended The Ohio State University and got a degree in political science and philosophy, and then enrolled in Yale Law School in 2010. First of all, to go from rural, poor Ohio to getting into, let alone being able to pay for and all that stuff, but just getting into Yale, that's impressive. Now, while at Yale, he not only met his now wife, Usha, but he also heard a talk by Peter Thiel, who's the co-founder of PayPal. And when he heard that talk, JD Vance says it was the most significant moment of his time at Yale. And from what I was reading, that kind of influenced him to eventually make the big move to go to San Francisco and become a venture capitalist. But he didn't do that right away after school. While he was at school, JD Vance began working on a memoir, which turned into his best-selling book that many of you guys know, I'm sure, Hillbilly Elegy, which has now been made into a Netflix movie. He started working on this book while at Yale at the suggestion of his mentor and Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother author, Amy Chua. Vance said, "I thought the idea that I could write a meaningful book was kind of arrogant and presumptuous. But then I started writing little things here and there, and then it became a best-selling book, which I believe is what first put him on the map nationally." After Yale, JD worked as a lawyer for a few years, and then he went to San Francisco to be a venture capitalist before launching his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, which became a bestseller. So he started writing the book while he was at Yale, I think, because that's when he got the idea. He started writing it. Then he worked for a few years as a lawyer, still was working on a book while being a lawyer, and then went to San Francisco to be a venture capitalist and then launched the book. That's a lot of work. You guys, I'm sure, have written papers, emails, documents. To write a well-thought-through book while being full-time with lawyering and being a husband, I'm sure at that point, I think he was, that's insane. So just that foundation that he built, not only of attending Yale Law School, but by doing all those things while writing a book, has definitely prepared him to handle the rigors of the campaign trail now. Next one, JD and his wife do not share the same religion. He has become recently a baptized Catholic, and his wife is a practicing Hindu. That was alarming to me to see that they're not even on the same page when it comes to religion That's another factor. You can put down in the comments what you think. I think that's weird, especially such contrasting ideologies and religions, Catholic and Hindu. Yeah. And last one, despite now being a former critic of Donald Trump, which JD Vance was a lot. He said a lot about stuff about Trump in 2016. He was not a fan. JD Vance is now a full supporter of him, obviously, and he said, quote, "I regret being wrong about the guy. I think he was a good president. I think he made a lot of good decisions for people, and I think he took a lot of flack." And another thing that I was reading was that JD took the full leap, he said, into abandoning the establishment in a way and supporting Trump when, if I can remember correctly, he saw how bad the backlash was against Trump. And I think he faced some of it when he started to run for Senate a few years ago. And he just went all in and he said, man, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to stand here and support this crap anymore. I don't think that's exactly what he said, but he did say that seeing the ridiculous backlash Trump got on a continual basis for minimal things, I don't remember which instance, but there was some instance that was the final push for him to say, hey, I'm going to go full bore in supporting this new MAGA wave and side away from the establishment thoughts, which he held back in 2016 when he was a critic of Donald Trump. That was some fun facts about JD Vance. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I put together different compilations where he was being serious, where he was being fiery, where he was calmly making great points, which I think is one of his strongest suits, how calm he stays and giving these lawyer-type answers, as you saw in the video with reporters, with so many others. I tried to give you guys a full mix of who he is and how he handles these situations, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. It's SeanDaniel. See you in the next video.